Hello there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's good to be with you on this Wednesday, September 21st, and here's some of what we're talking about tonight.
A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought.
President Biden addresses the UN General Assembly with a direct shot at Russia's Vladimir Putin. Then,
the pattern of fraud and deception that was used by Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization for their own financial benefit is astounding.
New York's Attorney General sues former President Trump and some of his children, accusing them of fraud and deception. Hurricane Fiona leaves behind a nightmare for the people of Puerto Rico.
The need for water makes us go to these extremes.
The Fed makes another big rate increase as it tries to bring down inflation. Will it work?
It's very hard to say with precise certainty the way this is going to unfold.
And primary care doctors are being called on to help identify early signs of anxiety. Former President Trump is facing a new lawsuit. This one targets his family businesses and his adult children who helped run it. New York's Attorney General Letitia James announced the suit today. Prosecutors claim widespread fraud in how Trump businesses manipulated property values. For example, the lawsuit alleges that Mar-a-Lago, down in Palm Beach, Florida, is worth about $75 million, but it was valued at nearly 10 times that. Attorney General James says the Trumps got far better business deals than they should have.
Pattern of fraud and deception that was used by Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization for their own financial benefit is astounding. Claiming you have money that you do not have does not amount to the art of the deal. It's the art of the steal. And there cannot be different rules for different people in this country or in this state. And former presidents are no different. No one is above the law.
The state of New York is seeking an array of punishments. They include $250 million in penalties, a permanent ban from running any company in New York, and a 5-year ban from borrowing money at New York-based banks. The state also sent a criminal referral to the U.S. Justice Department and to the IRS. That's essentially a list of federal crimes that Ms. James believes were committed. A spokesperson for the local U.S. Attorney's Office declined to comment. A statement from the Trump Organization reads in part, quote, "As we all know, today's filing has nothing to do with the facts or the law. Instead, it is about politics, pure and simple," unquote. Let's begin tonight with NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. He is a former federal prosecutor. Glenn, tell us what we should make of this lawsuit being filed, particularly in the context of everything else that's going on in the former president's orbit right now.
Joshua, I don't know if this represents the dam breaking, but I think it's an important first step for a public official, an attorney general for the state of New York, to sort of formally bring these charges forward against not only Donald Trump, but Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka Trump as well. Now, these are civil charges. This is a civil suit. And I would hasten to add that everything Tish James said today and everything we'll be talking about are allegations that will need to be tested in the crucible of a trial. But as I was trying to make my way through the 200-page plus complaint, what kind of leapt out at me is it looks like Attorney General James has got the goods. And the reason I say that is because there are so many specific references to things like Donald Trump personally directed the following. Donald Trump personally signed documents that were part of a fraudulent scheme. Donald Trump specifically told his staff to do X, Y, and Z. And I'll tell you, when we're putting legal documents together, whether it's a complaint like this or an indictment, we generally will not put anything in there unless we have the goods and we have the witnesses who can deliver the goods. And reading through it, it sure seems like a very compelling case that Tish James has brought against the Trumps.
Take a look at a list of the properties nationwide that are included in this criminal complaint. It's pretty broad, and that's why the copy is really tiny. But some of them include Trump Park Avenue, there's Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, the Trump National Doral, clubs in Mooresville, North Carolina, Sterling, Virginia, Jupiter, Florida, Rancho Palos Verdes, California, in Aberdeen and Turnberry in Scotland. Explain, Glenn, if you would, exactly what the allegation is. It sounds like basically the Attorney General is accusing the Trump Organization, the Trump properties, and the family business of lying about the value of these businesses. There's been a lot of talk in New York over the last few decades about, is he as rich as we think he is he as wealthy as we think he is? That was anecdotal. It sounds like she's saying that these embellishments actually reached a level where they weren't just kind of like, please give us a better deal, but they were blatantly outside the bounds of what the law allows businesses to do. Do I have that right?
Yeah, the allegations are that he was defrauding banks and insurers by inflating his property value when it suited his corrupt purposes, deflating his property values when it suited his corrupt purposes. And as you say, largely what we've heard is anecdotal, but what we are seeing in this complaint is concrete. And I think AG James was wise to highlight some of the concrete instances of fraud that are included in this lawsuit. And they're things we can all understand. For example, he represented that his apartment in New York was a 30,000 square foot apartment when it is less than 11,000 square feet. He made that misrepresentation for his own financial advantage. That's something we can all understand. He also said that there were some rent-stabilized apartments that he owned. They were professionally valuated to be about $750,000, but Trump certified that they were worth $49 million. I mean, these are the kinds of gross misrepresentations that I think we can all kind of understand, grab hold of. And that is why, this wasn't just rounding up $100. This was rampant fraud over a course of 10 years, according to the lawsuit. And it included not only Donald Trump, but his sons, his daughter, his chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, as well as another financial officer in the Trump organization, Jeff McConney.
I wonder if you have a sense or have any thoughts on what might have led up to this in terms of Mr. Trump pleading the fifth in previous proceedings. By one of our accounts, in one deposition, he did so nearly 450 times in a civil probe of his business practices. I wonder about the timeline getting up to this. He has repeatedly accused Letitia James of being politically motivated. She claims to have all the receipts. So if you're politically motivated to say that someone's jaywalking, and they are, it doesn't matter your motivation if you're right. But what about the politics of this? I mean, is it possible that him pleading the fifth, that her animus toward Donald Trump is the reason why we're seeing this lawsuit today?
I wouldn't say this is a political prosecution. Now, any elected official is going to be, at least in part, motivated by politics. We can't turn a blind eye to that. But here's the thing. When she brought Donald Trump in for a deposition to ask him questions about these, fraudulent acts that made their way into today's lawsuit, Donald Trump had every opportunity to testify under oath. No, this was not a fraudulent act, and here's why. Instead, Joshua, 440 times it was reported, he said, I'm pleading the fifth. I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination because if I answer your question truthfully, it will tend to incriminate me. There is no amount of politics that can sort of take away from the power of somebody pleading the fifth in a civil case, because that almost seals his fate in the event this case goes to trial, because the jury will be told he pled the fifth 440 times, and the jury in a civil case, unlike a criminal case, is permitted to hold that against him and draw negative inferences from it. So he now has an uphill battle if he tries to defend himself in this lawsuit.
NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. Glenn, appreciate you starting us off tonight. Thanks very much. Addressing the United Nations General Assembly is an annual ritual for any U.S. president. Last year, President Biden spoke soon after troops withdrew from Afghanistan. This year, he spoke hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a military draft to support the war in Ukraine. In an address on state television, Mr. Putin claimed that the West had threatened to nuke Russia and that he was willing to retaliate in kind.
Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. Just today, President Putin has made overt nuclear threats against Europe and a reckless disregard for the responsibilities of the non-proliferation regime. Now, Russia's calling up more soldiers to join the fight. This world should see these outrageous acts for what they are. Putin claims he had to act because Russia was threatened. But no one threatened Russia, and no one other than Russia sought conflict.
President Biden's speech covered an array of diplomatic issues, including America's tensions with China. He reaffirmed that the U.S. recognizes the Chinese government's authority over Taiwan, a long-standing policy known as One China.
Let me be direct about the competition between the United States and China. As we manage shifting geopolitical trends, the United States will conduct itself as a reasonable leader. We do not seek conflict. We do not seek a Cold War. We seek to uphold peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. We remain committed to our One China policy, which has helped prevent conflict for 4 decades.
The president also announced more support to fight the climate crisis. He promised billions of dollars in aid to help struggling countries pay for going green.
To meet our global responsibility, my administration is working with our Congress to deliver more than $11 billion a year to international climate finance, to help lower-income countries implement their climate goals and ensure a just energy transition. But let this be the moment we find within ourselves the will to turn back the tide of climate devastation.
And this commitment comes as Pakistan remains underwater from landmark flooding. Puerto Rico, of course, is also still recovering from Hurricane Fiona. We'll have more on that in a minute. Mr. Biden concluded his address by calling on the UN to face the world's challenges together.
My fellow leaders, the challenges we face today are great indeed, but our capacity is greater. Our commitment must be greater still. So let's stand together to again declare the unmistakable resolve that nations of the world are united still, that we stand for the values of the UN Charter.
Joining us now is John Herbst. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Ambassador, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Call me cynical, but I can't help thinking that Vladimir Putin planned that address on state television to come just a few hours before President Biden's address to the UN General Assembly. Maybe I'm just a cynic, but it seems too obvious not to be so. How did you read that split-screen moment?
I don't rule that out. Putin is, in terms of tactics, sometimes clever. But I think he was actually setting himself up for a fall, because given the aggressive nature of his talk, he gave Biden something to punch at very effectively.
And the administration, we heard from a senior administration official who said that the speech that was given was kind of contemplating the possibility that Russia might do something like this or that Vladimir Putin might say something like this. So by the way the administration put it, it sounds like they didn't have to do a whole lot of editing to get it ready for this morning. What did you make of the president's remarks about Ukraine and Russia, particularly in light of the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky also spoke today to the UN General Assembly, and a number of the nations in that hall probably feel the same way that President Biden does?
I believe the president has had a good week regarding our policy towards an aggressive Kremlin in Ukraine. His remarks today were strong across the board on foreign policy, also on China. But on Sunday, on 60 Minutes, and I think that this was put out in this White House statement today, he warned Putin very clearly, strongly, against using weapons of mass destruction. And since his administration has sometimes been weak on this subject, I think the president's statement was excellent and has given Putin something to think about and to worry about, which is exactly what we need.
What about this escalation in Ukraine, these territories that have been retaken from Russian occupation? A lot's been made about that in terms of turning the tide of the war, whether things are going the way of Ukraine. I guess I feel a little more circumspect about that, but how do you see those latest advances by the Ukrainian military?
Look, your circumspection is smart. This has been a clear victory for Ukraine. I would call it a tactical victory, not a strategic one. It does not mean the tide has turned. And in fact, Zelensky and other Ukrainian leaders have said, we're not saying the tide has turned. It's just been a good few weeks, actually a good 6 or 8 weeks for Ukraine. And this has all created a very serious problem for Putin in terms of his international standing. He was kind of apologizing to Xi, his Chinese partner, in Samarkand last week. And he was upbraided by Modi, the Indian leader, also in Samarkand. And he's under intense criticism in Russia, which may explain his steps over the last couple of days to endorse the notion of the sham referenda and to talk about a partial mobilization of additional Russian troops.
Yeah, and Vladimir Putin did refer to those supposed referenda in Donetsk and Luhansk to break away from Ukraine and rejoin Russia, among the many claims that he made during his address on state television. I do want to play part of what Volodymyr Zelensky said to the UN General Assembly, of course, asking for more assistance in the fight against Russia. Here's part of what he said today. Watch.
A crime has been committed against Ukraine, and we demand just punishment. Reject the right to vote, deprive delegation rights, remove the right of veto if it is a member of the UN Security Council, in order to punish the aggressor within the institutions.
Ambassador, do you think the UN is actually going to take concrete steps like what President Zelensky suggested to punish Russia on a diplomatic level?
Unfortunately, no, the institution is not made up in a way that makes that possible. I think the key things for the international community to do, led by the United States, is to provide more support to Ukraine in forms of weapons and economic assistance, and keep the sanctions pressure on Russia. If we can step up our game, provide the weapons we're not providing at this point, Russia will lose faster in Ukraine, which is very much in our interests.
Let me back up to China. You mentioned China earlier, and the president said in that 60 Minutes interview that the U.S. was willing to defend Taiwan if China invaded it or attacked it. But the U.S. also has this one China policy that's designed to keep that whole conflict sort of at arm's length. I feel like the situation between the U.S. and China is way more complicated and way more fraught than the situation between the U.S. and Russia in some ways. But how well do you think that President Biden is kind of managing that complexity in terms of the U.S.-China relationship?
On Taiwan, it seemed that when President Biden has said, he's said this multiple times, that we will defend Taiwan if China attacks. And then the White House said our policy has not changed. It seemed that President Biden had misspoke. But it's now happened, I think, 3 or 4 times. So I think he's added a new layer of ambiguity to our China policy in a positive sense. In other words, those statements that we would defend Taiwan, which the White House sort of walks back, I'm sure has China thinking, well, maybe they really will, which means it would be a caution to Xi against moving, to militarily attack Taiwan. But I would also add that the Ukrainian successful counteroffensive, which was only possible with American arms, has also cautioned Xi and reduced the chances of a Chinese attack on Taiwan.
I'm so fascinated by all the interconnections of all this and the fact that I think that we need to be paying so much more attention to all of these diplomatic moves for the reason that you mentioned, that we pull one string and something else unravels at the same time. So I'll be interested to see how all of this locks together in the end. John Herbst, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Always good to see you, sir. Thank you very much.
Same with you. Bye-bye.
Still to come, we'll have an update from Puerto Rico. Hurricane Fiona knocked out power and water across the island. We'll have the latest on the recovery and the storm's updated forecast. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. Hurricane Fiona is still strengthening after hitting Puerto Rico on Sunday. The storm is now a Category 4 hurricane. Forecasters expect it to stay that strong as it approaches Bermuda late tomorrow or early Friday. Officials say Fiona has killed at least 4 people, 2 in Puerto Rico, 2 in the Dominican Republic. In Puerto Rico, more than 500,000 people remain without water service tonight. More than 1 million are without electricity. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez has more from Utuado, which is a town in central Puerto Rico. Hey, Gabe.
Joshua, the Army National Guard here in Puerto Rico is rushing to bring much-needed supplies to some of those hard-hit communities that remain inaccessible because roads and bridges have washed away. Behind me, this bridge in Utuado in central Puerto Rico washed away. It was installed after Hurricane Maria 5 years ago. This was a temporary bridge that, as you can see, washed away again. So residents are wondering how and when it will be rebuilt. But this is something we have seen in certain parts of the island, mudslides cutting off entire communities. Earlier today, we were in another community, Bayamon, and in there, authorities rescued several people from the top of the mountain. A few others stayed behind, but locals say that this is something that Puerto Rico is used to, but some areas had not seen this much water in memory, not even during Hurricane Maria. Joshua, at this point, more than 70% of this island is without power. About half of customers are without running water. The governor still maintains that it could be several days before power is restored, although he concedes that several parts of the island, those that are harder to reach, may have to wait much longer, so he doesn't want to put a timetable on it. The governor and FEMA's administrator toured some of those hard-hit communities today, and we're now starting to see people, much like they did in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, go to mountainsides and use PVC pipes to collect fresh water. Another desperate night for some here in Puerto Rico, without power and without running water. Joshua.
Thank you, Gabe. That's NBC's Gabe Gutierrez reporting from Utuado, Puerto Rico. Now let's get the latest on where Hurricane Fiona is headed, and NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns is here with that. Hey, Bill.
Joshua, currently Fiona is the strongest storm on the planet. It's pretty rare we can see these so close to our U.S. shorelines. It's safely away, at least from the wind and also from any of the rainfall. But this storm will be on its way towards Bermuda tomorrow, and then as we head towards the end of the week, up towards Canada. So it's moved away from the Turks and Caicos. Right now, it's moving at about 9 miles per hour, 130 mile per hour winds. When you see the bright red around the center, those are the thunderstorms that we're showing you, and they expand high up into the atmosphere, thousands of feet. So here's the path from the National Hurricane Center. We highlighted this in colors. So when you have that yellowish color, that means tropical storm force winds, and that's what we expect in Bermuda. We do not expect a direct impact from the hurricane. For the East Coast, a huge storm like this is going to produce large waves. They are going to make their waves Thursday evening, definitely Friday into Saturday. So anyone has any interest towards the beaches or boating, it's going to be very difficult out there. So be very careful, especially in the southern beaches where it's still plenty warm to go to the beach. You know, watch for those red flags and check for any warnings before you head towards the water. Then we're going to watch as we head towards this weekend. The storm's going to become what we call almost like a super storm. It's going to be a post-tropical storm. It's still going to have the effects of a hurricane, but it's going to be called a little different as it makes a transition. So it's going to still have 105 mile per hour winds. It's going to slam towards Nova Scotia, especially the eastern end of the island towards Cape Breton. And this could be one of the strongest storms ever to hit this region. I mean, they've been hit by hurricanes before. It's not like it's never happened, but this one could be stronger than the two historic historic ones, which goes all the way back to the 60s with Guinea. That one had 105-mile-per-hour winds, and Igor in 2010 had 85-mile-per-hour winds. That's the worst storm in Newfoundland, and this one could rival or be worse than both of those. With that, right now we're thinking maybe 100 to 120-mile-per-hour wind gusts. That would knock out power, and all of our computer lines are pretty locked in now that Cape Breton area could be the worst. And the tropics are very active otherwise. We still have Tropical Storm Gustone. That's not going to hit anyone. We do have this area heading into the Caribbean. This is the area to watch. 90% chance of development with this one. And why are we so concerned with this one? Well, all of our forecast models take it through the Caribbean, near Jamaica, into the warmest water on the planet in the Western Caribbean. That's the fuel for the storms. And then possibly into the southern Gulf of Mexico. If it gets in there, it has to hit land somewhere, whether it's Mexico, Cuba, or the U.S. shoreline. So that's why we're so concerned with that. And as we go out 7 days, you can see our long-range, or 5 days, our long-range computer models are an excellent agreement too, Joshua. So that's why all eyes on this one. We don't know where it's exactly headed yet, but it looks like we're going to have a pretty big storm on our hands 7 days from now.
Yeah, it looks like it. Thank you, Bill. That's NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns with your forecast. More of tonight's top stories are just ahead, including an update on the lawsuit filed by migrants against Florida's governor, women in Iran burning their headscarves to protest the police, and the latest efforts to avoid a U.S. government shutdown. Tonight's headlines begin with immigration. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is defending his decision to fly migrants to Martha's Vineyard last week. They were coming from San Antonio, Texas. His office claims it was done voluntarily. A spokesperson for the governor shared a redacted consent form written in English and Spanish. The form asks migrants to agree to be transported outside Texas. NBC Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley has more from Texas.
We're down here in El Paso, Texas, where migrants are coming over every day. As you can see here, hola, we have young children being carried. Who's from Venezuela? Venezuela. There you have it. As you can see, the majority are from Venezuela. That's what presents such a unique challenge to border agents here and to city officials, because so many Venezuelans, unlike Central Americans, don't have family members here who are ready to sponsor them and take them in. So oftentimes they don't have a final destination in the United States. That is where the mayor of this city is stepping in and is using federal funds as a reimbursement mechanism to pay for buses to cities in the United States, like New York, like Chicago. You've often heard of that coming from Republican governors. This is a Democrat mayor doing it. But unlike those governors, he's giving those cities a heads up. And he says that he needs it in order to be able to get people out of here. He says it's a humanitarian mission because otherwise he has people on his streets. And we've also recently found out that in just the past 2 weeks, Border Patrol has released about 1,200 migrants on the streets here in El Paso. We've talked to some after they've been released. They've been taken to motels. Some are sleeping on the streets as they wait for a bus that can get them from El Paso onto other cities. Some we've spoken to here say they have very little money to their name. They are actually just trying to wait for donations, for food, for shelter, and to be able to get that critical bus ticket to the next destination, even though they really aren't sure what awaits them there. So we're sitting here right here in El Paso, really becoming one of the epicenters, an influx point of the migrant surge. As we now know, border crossings have increased, have gone above 2 million in the past 11 months. That's a record high. And being right here in El Paso, you can see it firsthand, both from the city's perspective, how they're managing with this influx, and also from the migrants themselves, coming over from Venezuela after a treacherous journey, oftentimes very dangerous, where their lives are threatened along the way. But they say it's worth it because what they're fleeing in terms of a socioeconomic and political disaster in that country, they say this was their only choice. They needed to migrate. They're not just coming to the United States, they're going to other countries as well. But here in El Paso, they're feeling the brunt of that. And from here, we will see Venezuelans going to cities around the country as the U.S. and the Biden administration figures out how to cope with this new surge and this new population of immigrants.
NBC's Julia Ainsley reporting from El Paso. Anti-government protests are intensifying in Iran, and they feature an unusual symbol of defiance: headscarves. This all started after a 22-year-old woman died in police custody. Iranian law requires women to wear loose clothing and to cover their heads. Police apparently arrested this woman for wearing her scarf too loosely. This week, some women have protested by burning their scarves and shaving their heads. NBC's Ali Arouzi has more from Iran's capital, Tehran. Hey, Ali.
Hey, Joshua. Well, for a sixth consecutive night, protesters have clashed with violent security forces across Iran as anger continues to boil over the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who was arrested by the feared and much-hated morality police because they deemed that the trousers she was wearing under her compulsory loose-fitting gown were too tight. And Joshua, with each passing day, the demonstrations seem to be getting bigger while engulfing more and more of the country. As the protests grow, the government keeps shrinking the internet bandwidth in some parts of the country, while in other parts they've imposed a complete internet blackout. They've also blocked all social media in an attempt to quell growing anger, stop video from being uploaded of protests and brutality, and try to hamper efforts for people to mobilize. Nonetheless, the scale and the scope and the nature of these protests are unprecedented in the 43-year history of the Islamic Republic. This has become a women's movement that encompasses a whole range of other issues. The hijab is one of the three main pillars of the Islamic revolution, yet over the last several nights in cities throughout Iran, women have been burning their hijabs and cutting their hair in public while being supported by large crowds cheering them on, chanting anti-regime slogans. Last week, this would have been an unimaginable taboo, but now it's happening. And it's also important to point out that only 6 months ago, some women who protested the mandatory hijab by removing it in public and waving it on a stick in the middle of Tehran somewhere were handed down double-digit jail sentences. And Joshua, it's also important to point out that many of the people protesting are Generation Z, teenagers or young men and women in their early 20s, the touchscreen generation that have grown up with social media, who are tired with an authoritarian rule that tries to control most aspects of their lives. And those list of controls that they impose on people are even more suffocating when they're applied to women. The spokeswoman for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights issued a stinging statement saying that their office has received numerous unverified videos of violent treatment of women, including slapping women across the face, beating them with batons, and throwing them into police vans. She said that the authorities have to stop targeting, harassing, and detaining women who don't abide by the compulsory hijab rules. And she's even calling for a repeal of all mandatory laws and regulations that impose mandatory hijab on women. But for the time being, Joshua, the protests are ongoing, they're violent, and predictably unpredictable. Nobody really has a sense of when or how this will all end.
Thank you, Ali. That was NBC's Tehran Bureau Chief Ali Arouzi reporting. On Capitol Hill, Congress is working to avoid a government shutdown. The deadline to pass a funding bill is at the end of this month, but a handful of issues remain unresolved. NBC senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor has more from Washington.
There are now less than 9 days to go before a government shutdown, and Congress has yet to figure out how to resolve the lingering issues and pass a piece of legislation and send it to President Biden's desk. There are 5 specific unresolved issues at this point, and let's put these up on the screen. The first is permitting reform. That's a promise that Democratic leaders made to Senator Joe Manchin to win his vote on the Inflation Reduction Act a few months ago. That legislation has yet to be determined whether it can get enough support from Democrats and Republicans to be added to this continuing resolution. There's also a question of funding for Ukraine. President Biden has requested $12 billion in aid that some conservatives are rebelling against. There's COVID relief money that many Democrats want, and Republicans are citing President Biden's remark Sunday on 60 Minutes that the pandemic is over as justification to say that that funding is no longer necessary. On disaster assistance, recent flooding that ravaged Kentucky could be an issue that certain lawmakers, including the Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, seek additional funding for, in addition to the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico recently. Finally, there's a rebellion brewing among certain conservative Republicans about how long this government funding bill should go for. Currently, congressional leaders are looking at a December date where they can, have a few extra months in the lame duck session to negotiate a final full-year deal. But some conservatives say kick it to 2023, the new Congress, in anticipation of Republicans taking control and being able to write the bill to their liking. It is unclear at this moment how these issues get resolved, but the clock is ticking. Congress has just 9 days to avert a government shutdown. Joshua.
Thank you, Sahil. That's NBC Sahil Kapoor reporting from Washington. Some breaking news tonight on the January 6th investigation, sticking with the Capitol. Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, has agreed to be interviewed by the House Select Committee in the coming weeks. That comes to us from a source close to the committee. You may remember this year the Washington Post reported that Mrs. Thomas tried to get lawmakers to overturn Joe Biden's 2020 election victories in Arizona and Wisconsin. She came under scrutiny after the Post published her text messages to the former Trump chief of staff, Mark Meadows. The messages tell him that Mr. Trump should not concede. Again, that's all according to the Washington Post. Weeks later, Mrs. Thomas told the conservative outlet The Daily Caller that she looks forward to clearing up any misconceptions with the January 6th committee. Speaking of that fateful day, you may remember U.S. Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman. If the name's not familiar, maybe this video is. Remember the mob that chased him down the halls of the Capitol during the attack? Mr. Goodman is credited with saving the lives of lawmakers that day. Well, today he took the stand in the trial against Doug Jensen of Iowa. Prosecutors accused Mr. Jensen of being among the mob that chased Officer Goodman. Prosecutors say his actions are all on video and speak for themselves. Mr. Jensen's defense argued that he was motivated by his belief in the conspiracy theory QAnon. He faces 7 counts against him. More than 870 people have been arrested on federal charges for their conduct, their alleged conduct, on January 6th. Up next, the Fed has raised interest rates again. Borrowing is getting more expensive, but how much will that ease inflation? We'll get to that just ahead. Stay close. Today, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates by another 0.75 percentage point, but more increases look likely. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell says they're pushing hard to bring down inflation.
My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. We are highly attentive to the risks that high inflation poses to both sides of our mandate, and we are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective.
Let's discuss it with Caleb Silver, the editor-in-chief of Investopedia. We must stop meeting like this.
Yes, we are always meeting like this, but this is the environment we're in.
It seems to be. What are your biggest takeaways from today in this latest rate hike, maybe compared to some of the previous ones we've seen so far?
It was the language, the words the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell uses. That's what got markets so upset today. That's what got people a little bit more tense because those words were more hawkish. He said this: "We will keep at this until the job is done. I wish there was a painless way to do this. There isn't." What is he talking about? Bringing inflation down by raising interest rate. This is the third 0.75 point raise we've seen in a row, and the Fed wants rates to be even higher. They're projecting the Fed funds rate to be at around 4.4% by mid-next year. So there's a few more rate hikes in our future.
Compare some of the reactions on Wall Street to the reactions on Main Street. It feels like sometimes they're kind of reacting to the Fed in the same way, and sometimes it feels like Wall Street is expecting to be able to make money the same way it did before these interest rate hikes, and I don't know if they're having an apples-to-apples conversation.
Yeah, let's do Main Street first, because what's happening on Main Street is very real, and it will probably bring down inflation if you look at the housing market. Look at the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. That is over 6%, highest since 2008. Look at APRs for credit cards, up around 18, 19%. That is a doubling in almost a 50% rise in almost a couple of years. Look at new car loans, that's almost 5% now, too. That's almost doubled from a couple of years ago as well. So everything we borrow that's not fixed is rising. And if you look at the housing market, we've had 7 straight months of lower housing sales, 9 straight months of lower builder sentiment. The economy is slowing down and will probably enter into a recession.
So let's stick with Main Street and then we'll get to Wall Street. So for people who are trying to buy a home or trying to sell a car, how should they navigate that now compared to where we were, say, a year ago?
Yeah, well, the rising mortgage rates are pushing a lot of first-time home buyers out of the housing market because they can't afford that monthly payment, or the stock of housing is so limited and it's at the high end that the down payment is high and the monthly service payments are very high. If you already have a fixed-rate mortgage, you're in good shape, especially if you got it 1 or 2 years ago when the interest rates were down near 3%. But if you're looking to buy right now, it's going to be very difficult, even though there's a little bit of a crack in housing prices right now. If you're about to buy a new car, you're going to pay a much higher finance charge than you would have a year ago or 2 years ago. So all those things are more expensive. If you have anything that's locked down already, that's good. But credit cards have these floating rates, these APRs. Those are around 18 or 19% right now.
Isn't it possible, though, that even if you're renting rather than buying, that you could still feel these increases because your landlord has to pay the mortgage on their property? Maybe they don't own the building or the land that you're renting in, and so you might feel these increases no matter what you do.
Great point. So because so many people are being pushed out of the housing market who would be buyers, that's driving them into the rental market. If you look at inflation, shelter, rent is one of the highest components that has risen the most in the past year. So that's why your rent's going up. Your landlord has to service their mortgage payments if their mortgage isn't fixed, but also everything's getting more expensive. Rent, food, shelter, electricity, more and more expensive.
With regard to Wall Street, Jerome Powell also acknowledged that the risk that these efforts could lead to or push us into an honest-to-goodness recession. Here's part of what he said about that. Watch.
No one knows whether this process will lead to a recession, or if so, how significant that recession would be. That's going to depend on how quickly wage and price inflation pressures come down.
No one knows whether this process will lead to a recession. So does the Fed know what it's doing?
Yeah, the Fed knows what it's doing, and it's likely that we are going to enter, or if we're not already in a recession, we're going to go into one in the first quarter of next year.
Does Wall Street believe that the Fed knows what it's doing? Is that why Wall Street is freaking out?
Wall Street thinks the Fed may have reacted too late and too harsh, and that's why they're freaking out. Nobody in the investment community was expecting the Fed to say, we want the Fed funds rate to be 4.4% by the middle of next year. We thought maybe there'd be a couple more hikes this year, and that would be that. But they clearly didn't have their handle around inflation. That's what they're hiking so aggressively. But the good news for investors, and this is very good news, actually, if you're a saver or if you're in the fixed income market or if you're in retirement, is that you're finally getting a return on bonds. You're finally getting a return at the bank on CDs. You're finally able to make money in the conservative part of your portfolio, even though bond prices are down, yields are higher. So for savers, finally a little relief.
He did mention, though, it's going to depend on how quickly wage and price inflation pressures come down. Wages feels like the piece of this that just is not getting addressed. That if you are an everyday person earning a middle-income earner, that costs are getting away from your wages. It's been that way for a long time, and that gap is just not getting closed toward allowing people to afford to live.
That's exactly right. Wages have increased about 5.2% in the past year. Inflation's up around 8.3%. There's a gap there, but for lower income workers, those wage increases are not enough to satisfy rising rents, rising food prices, rising electricity prices. It was a pretty hot summer. We were running our ACs full blast. It might be a cold winter. It's going to be a very tough time for people in median to low incomes going forward for the next 6 to 12 months.
Oh my gosh, my AC bill, Con Ed. We won't have that conversation. That will give me agita. Caleb Silver, editor-in-chief of Investopedia. Appreciate you walking us through this. Thank you very much. Doctors check for lots of things during a routine appointment. Now a federal task force is recommending checking for anxiety, too. We'll explain why before we go. What if you could catch mental illness before it became a bigger problem? That might be more likely if your primary care doctor screened for it. Now, for the first time ever, an influential panel is recommending just that. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force says all U.S. adults under 65 should get screened for anxiety. It's one of America's most common mental health disorders, and delays in seeking treatment are really common. One study found that the median time to start treatment after an anxiety diagnosis was 23 years. Joining us now is Dr. Sue Varma, a board-certified psychiatrist. Dr. Varma, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Talk about what an anxiety screening at the doctor's office might look like. Are we talking about a questionnaire or something else?
Yeah, so, 7 simple questions called Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7, and it gets at questions like how often are you worrying? Is it excessive? Are you preoccupied with bad things happening? Are you restless? And it might ask you questions about feeling irritable and worried or preoccupied with the future. We also see that sleep, feelings of panic, headaches, a lot of physical symptoms can also present. And, Joshua, I have to say that this is a really good thing because we spend as a country $300 billion on untreated mental health disorders. And a lot of that money goes to doctor visits. I often see people have seen 2 to 5 practitioners or specialists for cardiology, for the emergency room, for back pain, before things are finally diagnosed as anxiety and they see a mental health practitioner. So this can catch and save a lot of money and save a lot of lives.
What about the next steps in knowing how to respond to the answers that are given to the questionnaire? I mean, imagine if you are an expectant father, for example, and if you're asked, do you worry about the future? Do you have things that are persistently on your mind? They're going to say yes. But there's anxiety, and then there's things that make you anxious. How do we know what to do with the answers to that questionnaire?
Absolutely. And, it's really hard nowadays to tease apart because so much of what's actually happening in the world, inflation and all the things that you talked about are contributing to worry. And normally this would have been everyday worry where a person says, yeah, I'm worried about these things, but it doesn't actually cause impairment in functioning. And that is the hallmark of when something becomes an anxiety disorder and crosses the line over from everyday worry. If it's starting to impact your sleep, so if you're having trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep, are you finding that you're having palpitations, sweaty palms, headache, that this is affecting your productivity, that this is causing you to show up to work where what we call presenteeism, where you're present, but you're not actually doing work? Are you calling out sick a lot? Are you having a decrease in your immune functioning? Believe it or not, people really have been separating, oh, well, my anxiety doesn't wreak havoc in my life. But you know what? If you're getting more frequent colds and you're having a hard time getting better from them, this might be a sign that this is no longer just everyday stress, it's causing impairment in functioning.
I just want to zero in on something you just said about the nature of generalized anxiety disorder versus feeling anxious. The difference is, if I heard you right, is that it affects your everyday life, kind of in a longer term way, that there are noticeable impacts on your ability to live well. With that in mind, I wonder how you see the process of dealing with anxiety. I mean, some people I found have less anxious feelings when they watch the news a little bit less. I have dealt with anxiety and depression for years, have dealt with it with talk therapy, medication. God, the progress is slow. But sometime I noticed that, getting away from some of the jackasses in my life made my anxiety drop precipitously. So some of it is situational. How do we know what to do with it once we acknowledge, this is a problem that needs to be addressed?
Yes. I think a lot of times people have certain misconceptions about therapy, and this prevents and delays treatment, as we see that 23 years can be from the time of diagnosis to the time of treatment. And that's because this idea, somebody might say, I don't want to be in talk therapy. I'm going to have to rehash things from my past, and I don't want to go there. Or if I take medication, it's going to change my personality. I'm going to be a different person. Or I like my creativity and my medication is going to dull that, or I'm going to be like a zombie. And I can assure you, for someone who's been practicing for 15 to 20 years, I can promise you that it doesn't change your personality. And if anything, it helps you be the best version of yourself. And if you could alleviate some of those difficulties with concentration, with mood, with memory, it could elevate your mood and it could increase your productivity, then why wouldn't you want to do this? Another thing is that therapy doesn't have to be for a very long time, nor do you need to rehash stuff from the past. Of course, your therapist is going to want to understand where you came from, your early sort of family life, upbringing, all of that. Your childhood informs who you are. But 8 to 12 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy can be extremely beneficial of looking at what are these thoughts. Often they're distorted thoughts, they're ruminations. It's self-focused, preoccupied, getting out in nature, hanging out with friends, exercising, yoga, meditation, having a diet that's focused on Mediterranean diet, fresh fruits and vegetables. There's so many things that you can naturally do that are part of a comprehensive treatment plan and prevention.
Briefly, before I have to let you go, one of our viewers tweeted that their son texted how they were feeling and what they were dealing with. The viewer said, "I thought I knew, but I knew nothing." This recommendation has to do with adults. Very briefly, before we go, what about screening children for anxiety, talking to them about how they're doing?
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you that this is going to be the most bang for your buck if you can catch anxiety disorders early and have programs such as mindfulness-based stress reduction programs, which are about 2 hours, and have yoga and mindfulness and meditation implemented in the schools. I think it's so important if we can catch it earlier. There was talk of the task force implementing this. They had started the discussions back in April, and I think that it would be very beneficial. Look, who these days don't have anxiety? All of us do on some level. The question is, how much is impairing you? But getting treatment earlier on can be really beneficial and save people years of treatment later on.
Psychiatrist Sue Varma, doctor, appreciate you talking this through with us. Thank you very much. And thank you for making time with us. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this recommendation or anything we discussed tonight. We're at NBC Now Tonight on social media. Call us at 888-575-2NBC or email nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Thanks for making time for us, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.